Yeah. So did you guys listen to the last two guys Tucker had on too?
Which ones?
And Ben Carson was on
I haven't
today.
watched Ben Carson's yet.
I was getting into it while driving here, and Ben Carson's like, when I dropped out of the race the first time, I walked up to Trump and said, "God told me you're supposed to be the guy." So.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was funny, and he goes, so it was pretty much what Ben Carson was saying was anti what all that post says is. He went to Mar-a-Lago, and that's the first time he met Trump, and he had his mother and his family with him. And he goes, I'm sitting there, and President Trump, Donald Trump's sitting with me, and I meet him for the first time. And he's like, he was the warmest, most welcoming guy I've ever met in my life. And he goes, I was sitting there, and somebody's like, "Oh, my God, Rod Stewart just walked in. Donald, you should go see him." He goes, "I'm sitting with Ben Carson." And he just and he goes, at that point, he goes, I knew who I was dealing with. And he's like, from that point on, we just hit it off, and he was great. And I'm like, that's the thing, is people see a persona on television, and we spin it any way we want to fit a narrative any way we want to, and they're always judging based on snips and clips and everything we edit to paint a picture the way we want to.
And they're also now trying to say that he possibly wasn't even shot.
It's stupid.
People are crazy.
Yeah.
Or that he is the one that got the kid to shoot him in the air. An excellent marksman with iron sights. Did you hear the whole thing about iron sights? He didn't. At 140 yards, he had iron sights. Didn't even have a sight on that gun.
Is not an impractical shot.
But still, like for a 20-year-old kid, he had to get a lot of practice in to get that shot off.
Yeah.
I
mean, you should see what they make you shoot irons in the military all the way out to, and it's not an impractical shot.
But was the kid a military-trained kid?
Well, it was the whole speed of the bullets thing. Did you see that? Were we talking about that? The speed of the bullets? Did you not see that? The amount of bullets that were fired and the amount of time, they went back and did an audio analyzing with experts. There's 3 different weapons that were fired, but the first, however many bullets were fired so fast it was impossible that it was him. All of them were him. And then there was a shadowy figure on the water tower.
Oh yeah, I keep hearing that
thing. But the bullets, I'll have to find it. But it was they got the fastest shooter in the world to they didn't, but he had already done it in the 80s or 70s, maybe 90s. But then he had an AR-15 that he tried to rapid fire and got, and he was the speed shooter guy that broke the record.
Is it Jerry Mikulik?
No.
Old guy.
It is an old guy.
Yeah, from Louisiana.
It might be him. Yeah,
it's Jerry.
Going back to your roots there, knowing who it is.
He is that guy. Well, his daughter is now one of the shooters for SIG. Let me see.
It was a revolver record, and he did the speed loading thing too, and dropped another one in there and fired another. That's him. Oh no, he was wearing red.
In 1999,
that's the first
they sponsored a publicized attempt by shooter Jerry Michalek to challenge Ed McGivern's speed shooting record set back in 1932.
Patrick Bet-Davies was talking about this.
Using a Smith & Wesson performance.
All right, you want to film this one?
Yes, sir.
And
good old Cajun.
108-degree heat, I believe it was, down in Mississippi in front of a very supportive audience. He did it. I mean, he did 8 rounds in 1 second on one target.
Shooter ready. Stand by.
Okay, all right. He did 8 rounds on 4 targets in 1.06. And then he did the 6 shots, a reload, and 6 shots in 2.99 seconds.
Stand by.
Watch this.
Isn't that nuts?
How the heck did he reload, dude?
That's a revolver, remember?
I know.
So it's a preloaded, and as soon
And
as
he
it
just
hits, it
dropped it.
drops.
Yeah.
Yeah. But his daughter shoots for SIG now.
That's insane, though.
That's so fast.
Yeah. And I mean, he's shooting everything. He shoots shotgun here. Like, he's just...
Wow. Mind is blown.
I mean, you got to think, that dude's...
That's practice.
How many rounds has that
Practice? We talking about practice?
guy put
Talking about
down
practice.
range?
We were talking a little bit because, you know, we released our podcast on Saturday. We did it on Thursday. That's, you know, right in line with all the shooting stuff and blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, Biden's fit for presidency. He'll be okay. And then Sunday, the day after we release our podcast, is the day he steps out and releases on X, not Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, X.
Twix.
Yeah, Twix. That he's stepping out of the race. And the funny thing is, you know, everybody talking about how they haven't seen him. Is he alive or is he dead? There's reports that he was in Vegas and rushed to the hospital, and people didn't know if he was alive. There was also, like, you know, people are flipping rocks everywhere. So they were saying,
evac'd out of Las Vegas.
Right.
They had, what was it, the Las Vegas PD shut down the roads to quickly get him to the hospital, and then they got the call that they were just going to evac him in a helicopter. But, I mean, again, you know, my thing is you don't know if that's true.
All smoke and mirrors.
It's, I don't know.
and that's the funny thing. So that's, like you said, you haven't seen any of the news, and I don't pay attention, but mostly the news. I'll hear secondhand people talking about it. And I think the next part was, well, the other Democratic politicians were supporting due process and going through the process of getting to the next nominee. But I think in essence of time, in a couple days span, it went from that to Kamala is our newly supported nominee.
Unvoted,
Unvoted, not selected by the people.
Yeah.
Those 14.5 million votes that went to President Biden really don't mean anything because the delegates selected her. They're speaking for the people in a democratic society where we're supposed to speak for ourselves. I guess that's, when I get down to it, like, that's like we're talking through this series at church right now, the Vote for Jesus.
Yeah.
And it just kind of rounds out to that same thing where it gets to the point where, you know, it's, we need to value what Jesus values, right? Mm-hmm. That's the statement that was said to us this weekend. And we could talk all day about it. Like, I've been hearing crazy theories like the Leviathan front, which is, I don't know, it was on Tucker Carlson's show where they were talking a little bit about the corruption within politics. And I forget who he had talking through it. And it was talking about this whole backing of, we're going to put into office a person that's going to support the structure to basically deplete and diminish democracy in our nation, because that is the evil force behind it. And then the other portion of that is people are saying it's because it's Christian focused. It's a government that supports good, and evil wants to come against it. I mean, we are at a point where it's become a battle of good and evil. It's not a battle of Trump and Kamala anymore. It's more personal, right?
Your pillow is shedding.
Is it?
Yeah, just a little piece, just
little feather flying up on the back.
Probably shouldn't use
Seeing
that one
squirrels.
anymore.
But that's where it's been, like, the last few days, and, you know,
Did you catch him up while I was shutting the dog up?
Yeah, I think so.
You're all caught up now.
Yeah. But again, it's, you know, it gets down to the thing we were saying last week. Like, we know the ultimate authority. We know who wins. If it's this place, what are we fearing and why are we getting caught up in that? But in so many ways, that's what everybody wants to be caught up in, which realistically will probably be there till November until something happens.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, where would we actually be right now if that bullet did what it was intended to do?
It's just crazy to think.
Right?
It's a whole nother parallel universe that be going on.
Yeah, well, Biden's supposed to be here in Austin on Monday, so they've got us on full alert.
For what?
I don't know. Again, I don't care. I don't know. I just know that.
And you just trot him off into the sunset.
I mean, he's still the president of the United States, so if he wants to come and speak, I guess he can come and speak. So,
yeah, I'm not a buyer of the whole fact that it's a different actor every single time wearing a mask. The guy speaks the same in every situation.
Yeah.
So let him come, and if he's of relevant mind and body and stuff, speak. You're our authority. We're going to pray for you till November when you're gone, actually January, because it'll be January when he's gone. But unless, God forbid, something happens between now and then. And I mean, it's gotten out of control with.
There's no telling what could happen.
Theories and conspiracies.
Like nothing surprises me anymore.
Nothing does surprise me.
Maybe 3 or 4 years ago I'd have been like, "Wow, really?" But
that's like I was talking to him, and it almost sheds like the evil name into it. I was listening to Tucker Carlson's show, and they were talking about the Leviathan theory of government and the evil insurrection takeover happening within. And it was also talking about political lines, and doesn't matter if you're a D or an R, there's people crossing over in both boundaries, because there's Republicans that are like, I'd step into that have done some nasty.
Well, the problem is it's become a career, and it was never meant to be a career. Yeah. It was meant for a short period of time for people to step up and do what's right for their country, and not to make you a multi-millionaire and to make it a legacy for you. I mean, that just ruins it. Once you start pulling in all of that money and all of that influence, and nobody's going to be doing the right thing 100% of the time. Right. Everybody is for sale. Even the guys that we like that are over there are for sale.
Right.
And it's just, I mean, to me, that's the biggest issue that we have. It's not who's president or vice president. It's the Congress. It's our senators. It's the House of Representatives. It's people that have made a career and a living off of selling their soul.
That's exactly what they do.
It 100% is for the dollar.
It is. I mean,
it's narcissism.
We spoke about it last week. If you could put all the sponsorships on their coats when they walked into the building,
know truly who was sending them in there and why they were saying the things that they were saying.
A lot of stuff is hidden in a super PAC.
Oh man!
Right, because bills are passed that
Pfizer, sponsored by Pfizer.
Everything.
What was it? Tucker was just talking about. He read. I cannot remember the name of the bill, but he read it and said it took him 14 months to read the bill, like the actual bill. It took him 14 months.
Green,
was it
Green New Deal?
Was it the Green New Deal that they packed so much stuff into the back end?
Pelosi said we have to pass it so we can know what's in it.
Yeah. Come on.
That's literally what she said.
I know.
They've gotten to the point where they're not even trying to covertly hide what they're doing. They're just putting it out there and throwing it in our face and saying, "What are you going to do about it?"
Man, and
basically,
that's why, like, I'm with you. I don't watch a lot of news. I don't get caught up in it because you have to trust and know, like, God's got me. I'm fine. I can't get caught up in this crap. We'll talk about it. You people want to hear about it. And, from an outsider perspective, at the end of the day, we're still looking at what's better, I guess, in a situation. Like, we'll use that term, or what we think is better based on the policies that are put in front of us. What transitionally fits our ideals of what we think is logical in that time, which that's where people battle right now. What is illogical, logical? I mean, we look at specifically like crazy right now as normalcy, and it just blows my mind in instances, even in biblical instances, where people are trying to excuse the crazy, and that's not biblical, does that mean we have to excuse or appreciate things that are said by either person that are stepping up to a podium? No.
Well, I mean, 20, 25 years ago, we could sit right here and I'd have no clue who you were going to vote for, who you were going to. It just wasn't we
were talking about that
regular conversation. It wasn't topic. It wasn't.
There wasn't as much polarization, I don't think, either.
Not at all. And, now it has become such a divisive thing. And the bottom line is, everything that Trump stands for, I'm not all right with. Like, I'm not going to align 100% with every one of his decisions and policies, nor am I with Biden or whoever takes Biden's place, Kamala. Yeah. But we have to know what that line in the sand is for us and where those priorities are as far as policy and decisions and what they want to do with the country. And those are the ones that you kind of have to stand on. And mine can be totally different than yours and vice versa. But the bottom line is, just because I vote for Trump doesn't mean I agree with everything that he says. Just because I vote for Biden doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he does. Right. It's become so divisive with this two-party system. And everybody, and we talked about this last week, everybody gets lumped in to one of those two categories. And unfortunately, there are hot topics in each of them. And if you are for one of those hot topics, bam, you're far right, or bam, you're woke left, And it's like, I guarantee you that we probably have far more things in common than we do different.
Right.
And we can stand on each side of the aisle. Now, some of those key things may be different, and some of the priorities that I have and what I believe in might be different, but that doesn't mean that we can't sit down, hang out, talk, have good conversations. Like, there are a couple of guys that I work with that, like, strong Christian. Everybody knows it, have no problem talking about it. One of my good friends at the department is an atheist. Him and I can sit there and talk and hang out and laugh. Like, he still calls me on the regular. Right. Like, we're good friends.
Yeah.
So, I pray for him.
Right. Yeah, I told you about my friends.
And he laughs about it.
I mean,
it's just.
We all have friends that don't believe, and we still love them.
Right.
But the media and the government want to just try and drive that wedge in between the two parties or the two views or whatever it is, and just make everybody hate each other.
It's kind of, you bring up an interesting point. People with different religious beliefs get along just fine.
Absolutely.
Right. Or no religious beliefs get along just fine. But if you belong to a different team of politicians, you're automatically the enemy.
Right.
Whereas if you're Jewish or Buddhist or Muslim, you're not my enemy.
Right.
And the bottom line is, we're all Americans. And when it comes down to the President of the United States, we should all be looking for what's in the best interest of the country, right?
Right.
So at the end of the day, our goal is the same. Now, maybe the way that we get there or some of the policies that we put in place are going to be different, which causes the two sides that we have. But at the end of the day, we're all Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could just get to that point to where we realize that, we're all on the same team, we're just trying out for different positions on the field, is it maybe a way to look at it? But all of this inner bickering and, division that's going on is just, it's crushing everything.
Right. And it was funny. I was listening and heard somebody speaking today a little bit about just basically Christianity, a post-Christianity view, and everything that's coming against the world right now, or against politics, against living, is in opposition to Christ. Like, if Christ comes into a conversation with people, it is automatically like been put on the other people sitting on the other side of the fence, that we need to judge those people like they're judging us in a harsh manner right away. Like,
and it is just Christianity.
Right.
It's not any other religion. No, right. It's Christianity. I will 100%. Agree with you on that.
And that's where we established this podcast to say, like, this is 90% Christian view. Of course, just like in police brutality or anything else that happens in the world, where even now, like organizations are calling for police officers to take their body cams off because it's proving the opposite of what they wanted them to see. It's proving that those people are actually, the crimes are still happening, the interactions are still happening, and normally the police officers are justified. But they wanted to prove a different agenda with that, so they wanted everybody to wear them. But now they're asking you to take them off because it was proving the exact opposite to what the narrative wanted to be.
Yeah.
And it's just like that in, like, being a man of faith. Like, people think we're walking out and judging them, but we're like, no, like, come to our table. We want to hang out. We want to be friends. We want to have the friend that's there because we want you to see a light in us that brings joy to you.
Right. They're trying to paint a picture to where everyone else that doesn't know automatically either hates us or is standoffish because of the rhetoric that they're putting out. And yeah, it's frustrating.
Well, it's in it. We did this to ourselves too, because then we lived on a basis of religion early in our lives too. Religion was important. So Catholicism, Methodist, Lutheran, Baptist. I mean, you could throw religion out there, and not saying there's anything wrong with that, but when there's rules of engagement and rules of worship without following truth, I have a Glow Bible today, whatever way I'm going to do that to get into the Word to actually find out what that truth is people were pointed to the rules that were in that engagement, and they were looking at people and saying, well, if you're a Catholic, you are legalistic.
Right.
And I mentioned it a little bit last week, how Jesus came to be a rabbi, a teacher to the people, but it was rabbis and people developing laws. And I actually wrote down what it was called because I had to get into studying my knowledge there last week, and I didn't bring it with me. But it's okay because that's my ADD brain. But that's all right. But it's the whole fact that, like, that's what Christianity is we're not legalistic. We're realistic. We're trying to create a relationship, and realism and relational aspects combine. It's not, I mean, when you're building a wall, you're developing a crack for access to evil, to access the thoughts. I mean, because when you're like projecting hate or projecting something like that in people, or people are having negative feelings even about what I'm saying right now, that's not God. That's not Jesus. That's not his heart. So that's what I'm.
And it's interesting because I heard someone, I'm trying to remember who it was that I heard bring this up, but they said that basically the Bible says that all that is required of you to be saved is repentance and faith. Yeah. And he was like, some of you are saying obedience. And he goes, no, it's repentance and faith. If you have repentance and you have faith in in the Lord, that Jesus was crucified, died, rose again. If you have that faith, you have that repentance. Once you have that relationship, then the obedience comes.
Right.
You don't have to be obedient. It's like when they talk about, coming into the church, like, well, do I have to give up drinking before I go to church? Can I still smoke weed and go to church? Well, I mean, it's not my job to tell you to clean yourself up before you come in. Like, come in, and coming in and getting to know and having that relationship with Jesus
cleaning your
is
house
what
before the maid comes.
Right.
I'm looking for your light bulbs because my mind's going ding 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 ding. But no, it's like
it's that. But my point is that obedience side is that legalistic side. It's people sitting here saying, no, you have to be this and you have to do this and you have to say this and you have to, blah 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 before or in order to get all of this. No. Well, you don't. That comes not because of anything that you do, but it comes because of Christ, because of God.
The relationship. And that's where the light bulb's going off in my head, and I'm like, got the buzzer going, and I'm like, I need to jump in, interrupt John in the conversation. He's exactly right. He is. But people say we're excusing sin. we're not excusing sin. A relationship with Christ, recognizing that, asking for the Holy Spirit to dwell in you, it changes you. When we talk about dying to ourselves, like, you want to be different. You want better, whatever different, we want to call it.
And better. We're just going to make a new
play
word.
On that.
We need to make a shirt.
Shirts.
Better friend? How about better friend?
Better friends. But that's it. Like, we're not excusing sin. We just realize that your life actually changes. Your heart condition changes towards people, things, interactions, speak, everything. Yeah. You want to be what you think the relationship is in whatever Bible you're looking at today that was created by God. It's a simplistic form of thinking. Everything's based on faith in a God that died for everything I've ever done to hurt anybody, to protect me, and his blood covered that, recognizing that he defeats the evil in my life regardless of anything, and that he's always there for me, right? And it's like, when you realize that and you finally get it, like, something snaps in your brain and you're like, oh man, I'm not excusing sin. And it doesn't mean I'm not gonna self-correct people or autocorrect people that I love, but I'm not going to take it in a legalistic format and tell them that there's rules of engagement either.
Right.
It's like a tackling, like people are like, well, you don't believe in homosexuality or something like that. It's like tackling those topics. It's not that I believe or don't believe in those topics. It's I believe in you as a human being that was created by a God who loved you also. That I'm going to invite to my table and hope and pray that the Holy Spirit dwells in you to change your life. Not necessarily change what your sexuality is, change what your mindset is, change what you say is. You're going to find something different in that relationship than I found in that relationship. But is it my job to construct your feelings and how the Holy Spirit is dwelling in you or the access you have to him? No.
Well, and if I had to fix myself before I could walk into the doors of the church, I would never walk into the doors of the church.
A lot of people don't because they think they have to.
I agree. And they, you need to know.
Yeah, and man,
please come.
When I've seen people come in, like at that Tuesday night service a couple of weeks ago, at the men's service, the guy came in crying. You know, he was broken and he needed help. That's when you need to go to church. That's I mean, even if you're not, you need to go. But
we are there to welcome people in and love them. Like, we talked about this a little bit last week too. Like, is there truth in all that joy and smiling that you see around the table when you're there? And you know, we were skeptical of those things when we first walked in the church, and then we got involved and engaged and became leaders in the church. Our wives work in the church, women's ministry for my wife and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, no, that joy's there. The mess is there too.
Oh, absolutely.
Our baggage is all around us. But
the nice thing is that you have that community, you have that tribe.
Yeah.
So if you are having issues and if you have that baggage or you have that mess, like, once you start to establish that group, like, it's so easy to be able just to reach out or grab somebody and say, hey, I need some help.
Right.
You know, or if they're close and they're paying attention, they're going to know before you ever ask.
Yeah.
And they're going to walk up to you and be like, hey, let's go to coffee. Let's go get some coffee.
Yeah. Right.
You know, let's go to lunch. Let's do something. And then they're probably going to approach you and going, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
You know, I can tell that something's not right. And I know for a fact there is a recent encounter that my wife had. And like, women's intuition, I don't know what it is, but she was like, for a couple of months, I knew that something was going on. And she was like, and I had to sit there and kind of wait. And then when that opportunity arose and it was the right time, it's like, so is everything all right? And
yeah, all it takes is one person. And
it's a waterfall.
Just to ask. And
it's like, all
to
right,
care,
well,
to show that they
let's
care.
walk it out.
But
yeah,
even for the people that struggle with care and compassion, like, I was never really good at asking people how they were, right? Because when you're prideful, you know, you're concerned about yourself,
right,
in a lot of ways. And like, you start to learn that, really, and it becomes an aspect of your inner being, like, where you're like, okay, if I say that, how's that going to affect the room? Is it deflating? Is it encouraging? You know, if I'm saying that's my, like, it changed the way we parent our boys. I mean, we've talked about how we used to lead in a very dictative way to our sons, and you know, we probably created damage that we'll never know about in our lives, and hopefully it's been repaired in some way.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like, how are we becoming different each time? Like, what did we die to become more of an encourager in the situation? Because that's what the word teaches us. I mean, I heard somewhere today, you know, the Bible says, do not fear. I think I was listening to the Bible recap, and Tara was talking about how the Bible says 365 times, do not fear, or do not be afraid. One for every day.
Yeah.
And, you know, that just struck a chord with me today, because so much of what people are led by is the things that they don't want to look over their shoulder for.
Huh.
That's good.
Well, that comes down to like anxiety too. I know I've seen a couple of reels where they talk about it, but where they did that study, and that the part of the brain that feels anxiety or anxiousness is the same part of the brain that processes thankfulness, and they cannot do both at the same time. And then there's the verse that says, be anxious for nothing, but in all things, be thankful.
Right.
And I know that's not verbatim, but it's just kind of crazy how, I mean, he did create us. He already knew, hey,
I've heard a similar analogy about
the way to not be anxious is to be thankful. Wake up and be thankful for what you have. And then that anxiousness goes away.
Right.
So
I'm looking for that part of the brain, I think. The hippocampus.
the hippopotamus.
The hippocampus. I forget what that part of the brain is for, but I actually think it was from Greek. I'm looking up stuff about it, but it is also where your, like, feelings and...
where your, like, compassion comes from.
Like some of that stuff, but also your personal growth keeps you healthy. Like, I forget what I was reading about it. Of course, you know, when it gets down to the point where I'm reading self-help books and studying because just think about how amazing our mind is. You know, we utilize 10% at the very most of a hard drive that is endless, right? And our memory capacity is just crazy, right? And we don't even know how to access the full capacity of that. I mean, if we could crack the code on that someday, that would be amazing. But just, it's like, I like learning about stuff like that.
Do we want to?
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, because then you know too much. But at the same time, and ignorance is bliss, right? That's what we know and understand. But hopefully not too much.
Unfortunately, people like to be in that bliss forever.
I was just about to say, sometimes
laziness
is just annoying.
They think the ignorance is helpful.
So the verse was Philippians. So it's Philippians 4, 6 through 7. Yeah. And it says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds in Christ Jesus. So it's just, whenever I saw that, I was like, man, you know, it's, again, it's right there. Like, everything that you need to know, if you've got a question, it's in that Bible.
So the hippocampus is all about memory. So I was off a little bit.
You're on. I got it right here. Associated with emotions and behavior.
Yeah.
It's part of the limbic system.
But that gets back to the narrative of
short-term memory, long-term
marketing and personal recall and things that flash in front of our faces, and why it's flashed there to control us, like to control our emotions, to control our buying habits, to control our impulses, to control everything. We live in an environment bent on manipulation.
Did that start really taking over when the TV was invented? Because they could put things in front of you instead of just making you listen to it on the radio?
I mean, that's part of it, right?
I wonder. Is that when advertising and marketing really started to take off? I mean, advertising's been around forever. They've always,
I was going to say,
they've always been advertising snake oil even, and back in the day, but
maybe as far as like video form. Yeah.
Video killed the radio star.
For sure.
That's it.
That makes me think of the movie Empire Records. Do you remember that?
Classic.
Squirrel.
Squirrels.
Hey, that was like one of the big songs on that. Well, there were a plethora of good songs on that movie.
But it, that's it. I mean, it's what are we doing to just look past the manipulation and see? I mean, we're at a point right now, and if you're not offended, I don't get it. I mean, well, offense is coming from not the right source. It's not God to be offended. So I guess I'm going to correct myself in that statement. But to understand that we live in a democracy where people voted for a person, and now that they're going to basically say that doesn't matter. We're going to use our delegates that were proportionate to your votes and just place a person in place.
So are we going to argue democracy over republic?
Over Democratic Republic?
Dude, it's...
I'm going to let him go with it.
No, but yeah.
I mean, there is a democratic process.
Right. Yes.
But we don't really vote for we don't vote for the president. We vote for people to vote for the president.
Right.
They don't have to vote.
We vote for those delegates.
Yeah.
The delegates are the representation of... But they're supposed to be a representation of the people.
But again,
which they normally
you've got
are.
career politicians that are being paid out the wazoo, and they don't care.
Yeah. Today's episode brought to you by Topo Chico.
Somebody was talking about how
it's like
the same people have been running for the same elections for the last 50 years.
Right.
Like 60 years or something.
And hopeful sponsors,
well, and
Black Rifle.
Even like new people that come in when the old guard goes out and the new guard moves in, like you can watch it. Like they're solid for maybe that first term. And then, and especially with social media and with...
Don't get me started.
Well, they can't hide what they're doing.
Right.
Because there are people that are watching and there are people that are going to put it out there. And it's so much easier now to see... Exactly. So much easier now to see when that corruption starts. You know? And the intent might be right when they first get elected. But I mean, when it's that lucrative, why would you walk away after 2 terms? Why would you walk away from something that is going to not only make your family, air quote, happy, but in society's mind, successful, happy, and that you can pass that down and be generationally wealthy? That's
a monarch, a royalty that we left over in the UK.
Yeah, we're not. We're not Marxists. Don't make us Marxists.
But the sad thing is that you can bring that up, and those people that are in place aren't going to vote for term limits whenever it comes to those positions because it's not in there.
Got jacked up,
right?
So
yeah, and that's the problem. They're never gonna. I mean, there are people that have put it up for a vote, but it never goes through because the majority don't. They don't want to lose their.
Sorry,
their golden goose.
No, not at all.
He's chasing squirrels over here.
Yeah. He is. He's talking about. Sounds like Bobby Boucher over there.
I feel like you ever play the game Hungry Hungry Hippos, man. I'm like, that's my campus. That's my chase the balls. You know, a little crazy
I just hear Bobby Boucher and the medulla oblongata.
I had a big cup of coffee. That's why I'm not touching this back here before I came here today. We're going to have to calm that down before the next episode.
So, one of the questions we had on our notes from Sunday's service was, what opportunities has God given me to make my city more aligned with God's kingdom? What opportunities?
Well, hopefully this right here is one of those opportunities, and not just for our local community, you know, city or tri-city area that we're in right here. But, I mean, hopefully
Hayes County's fast growing.
Yeah, hopefully we're reaching people, and I know we are, outside of Central Texas. And, I mean, the further that we can get, the better. But
we're even getting all the way to Chicago.
Right.
South side.
All
right, got that out of the way.
Well, thank you. I got you.
Messed with his hippocampus.
Oh,
yeah.
Squirrel.
Man, wow. White Sox rule. not really.
White Sox rule.
Bad year. But it's funny though. Like it gets down to those things of people just want to see the surface again. And I said it last week. Like open the pages, read the book. Like you're not going to gain knowledge by seeing what's on the surface. And so many people get caught in the surface of things that they don't want to see anything else, and they'd rather believe a lie. It's funny, when people tote narratives in front of us and we seek it, it's detrimental. It hurts. Yeah. It's, I mean, all of us could sit there and say that, no, we're not better off than we were 4 years ago. We're not. And to deny that, people are going to look at us and be like, well, that's because of who you are and what you do. You could judge us in any manner, but just realistically in the way
the country as a whole is not better off.
No, the division's grown deeper. It's significant and
measurable. I mean,
but that's where he said, right? Like, and this was preached to us, is we need to value what Jesus values. Mm-hmm. The only way you're going to learn what Jesus values is to read a Bible. Read a verse. I mean, if you've never done it before, read a verse a day. It's not hard to do.
Well, they've got great journals that are out there too, like is it Jesus Calling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially if you don't have like a strong background or a strong base, like that's one that anybody can pick up and go day by day.
Right.
And it's a great introduction. A buddy of mine, I think I talked about it last time, just got introduced to it, and he's like, it is amazing.
Yeah.
He was like, and he's in a situation to where, he doesn't have a lot of outside noise right now, and he's able to really get laser focused on stuff. And he's like, he goes, that's amazing. And I almost feel bad because it wasn't me that gave it to him, and I should have. It was actually somebody that is there with him that gave it to him. And I was like, what?
Well, maybe that's how it's supposed to be.
You
helped get him there.
Right.
So
right. Absolutely. But it was like, man, what was that should have been one of the first things, you
thought of. Right?
Yeah. And I will say this, side note, Squirrel, crazy story was the night that we were packing up to go get him to treatment. And we're sitting there, and I mean, his anxiety level is through the roof. He even had me nervous with, the level that he was at. But we're upstairs, and I'm hanging out with him, just trying to give him encouraging words and helping him kind of put together a go bag so that we can just head over there and get him checked in. Casey texts me, does he have a Bible? And literally, and she's grabbing one for him, because we've got a couple, and she's grabbing one, does he have a Bible with him? Because everything was getting thrown together so that we could get there pretty quick. And as she's texting me that, he looks up and he goes, hey, you have a Bible? And it was like, as he said that, my phone goes, boom, boom. And I look at it and I was like, you got to be kidding me. She was like, I got one in hand for him if he needs one. And I was like, he literally just asked for one. This is, all right, God. Like, we hear you.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's like,
I love when that happens.
When people are saying, like, God's timing's always perfect. Right. And we know that. Like, we've felt it in our lives. And we now see it, like, in our daily. And people are like, well, like, I don't understand how God speaks. Like, you just have to be open to see him speaking to you and Christ working through your life. It really is just a state of mind and being. And it is welcoming. It's inviting. And it is a relationship.
Well, and the only way to be able to hear his voice is you have to know what it sounds like, and the only way to know that what it sounds like is to have a relationship. It's like if you're in a pitch black room with a whole bunch of men in there, but your dad is one of those men, and your dad speaks up and says, hey, James, you're gonna know immediately who that is, because your entire life he's been your dad, and hopefully in a positive way. Even if it's not a positive way, you're going to be able to identify that voice.
Right. Yeah.
But if there was a random person in there and I'm asking you to pick them out, there's no way.
Right.
So I mean, in order to
That's good.
Know when God is talking to you. You have to have a relationship first and foremost, and you have to know
what his voice sounds like,
what it sounds like, and what God is telling you,
what the content would be.
Right. Because if he's saying, "Hey, that Ford F-150 Lariat is real nice, go and buy it," like, no, that's not God talking to you. It's like you said, content. You have to know what his heart is and what his intentions are, and it's at the end of the day, it's to glorify him.
Right.
And if it's not something that's going to glorify him, it's not coming from him.
His will be done. His kingdom come.
Yep.
Right. And it's funny, we were talking about even just praying this weekend. It's not our opinion that matters. It's the prayer to the God to our God that matters, to Jesus and to his life, to what his opinion is, and finding that wisdom and looking into it, like the Lord's Prayer. How should I pray? Right? He's like, this, our Father who art in heaven, or who art. I said aren't. Wow, that's Southside coming out of me. Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
Yeah.
Thy will be done.
Right.
On earth as it is in heaven. Right? And every prayer I've prayed since, I don't know, a point 5 years ago in my life or something like that. I don't even know how long it's been. God, your will, your kingdom. It's not mine. Nothing is mine. And I give me your wisdom, Lord, to see that and understand it and hear it and know it. And, we were talking through verses, and James 1:5 was one that was spoken to us this weekend in the message, and it was, if anyone or any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. I mean, just who gives generously to all without finding fault. So if we live in a society that's legalistic and bent on the sin that we create, we're all at fault. We're all running from something.
Right. I mean, the world that we live in is all about condemnation.
And this is a God that's inviting us in, saying, no, I know you screw up, and I still want you. I don't want you to run from me. I want you to come to me. So.
What was the question that you brought up just a second ago, James? You were talking about what can we do?
In our community, what opportunities do we have in our city to make my city more aligned with God's kingdom?
I think one of the easiest and best ones that we can do is just who we are and how we are. Like how we live out our life, what we do to represent, Christ. And that's, I mean, I can sit here and I can tell you all the right words and use all the right scripture and sound holier than thou. But if I'm not living that out in my everyday,
right,
people are going to see that and they're going to go, I'm not falling for that. But if you have somebody that doesn't even constantly talk the right talk, but all they do is they keep their mouth shut and they walk the walk, people see that and they go, oh, okay, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Learned the word meek years ago, and it was funny because got called out by our pastor, and he said, you just need to be a little more meek. And I'm like, okay, what's that mean? But it's strength in silence.
Absolutely.
Quiet.
And I'm like, oh yeah, I talk too much. Welcome to a podcast.
Was that
so I did a big study on the word meek and what it means and what it's meant to mean in the Bible and how it's been misconstrued over the years about how when we think of a meek person, we think of it as almost a negative, like
timid and cowardly kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
But and man, it's been a while since I did read about this, but I think it was the war horses, and was it the Roman war horses? But they would go and they would pick these specific horses, and they would look at characteristics and attitude and grit and all of these things, and there were certain ones that they would pick that were the war horses, and they would call it meeking the horse. And to meek the horse means that horse has great courage, great grit, will run through a brick wall, but it'll only do it for one person. And that's the rider of that horse. It will not listen to, it will not take commands from anybody else but that one rider. So if you think about that and you transition that into what the Bible means when we need to be meek, we need to be great, we need to be mighty, but we only answer to one person. And it was interesting how they called it meeking a horse, so that it was only responded to and listened to that one person. So meek, and I mean, I think Jordan Peterson's gone off on it where he talks about, make yourself a formidable, character, make yourself a monster, and then learn how to control that monster that's within you. And I think that's, as men, I think that's a huge thing. And we're getting away from that in society to where they're trying to the toxic masculinity,
right,
and trying to get rid of all of that. But and now, mind you, with military and law enforcement, for as many years as I've been doing it, like that is our goal,
right,
is to be able to show up on the scene or show up in battle and being a monster if we need to be.
Right. It doesn't have a negative connotation to it. It has a connotation of strength and power within the situation.
And knowing how to control it.
Meek is control.
Right.
It is listening, interpreting, and understanding.
Yeah.
And blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Yeah.
That's Matthew 5:5. And it was brought to my attention at that point, like, you talk too much. And I'm like, oh, man, I do. I'm like... And even in the career choices that I've had in my life and being in sales, you do learn over time that you got to listen. The better you could listen, the better you are at what you do.
But isn't it a shame that it takes us so many years to figure that out? Because
I still struggle with it with our wives.
Well, and I try and tell like some of the younger guys, even in the church, like the youth, and even some of the younger guys in the police department, like, man, like God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
I was just thinking that same
because
thing.
He wants us to listen twice as much as we talk.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you can learn to keep your mouth shut when you're around older and wiser men, those men were probably like you were, and they probably had to run through walls, which probably did a lot of damage to them. But if you sit there and you listen to them, they can actually walk you through and help you avoid having to go through those traumatic incidences or running through walls.
Mistakes in general.
Right.
And all you got to do is listen.
Right.
All you got to do is listen. And I think I was at my 2-year mark in the police department, and we got a new corporal. And this guy came in, and he was just your quintessential, like if you were going to cast somebody as like a cop's cop, this was Randy Milstead. Like he walked in and he was, lean and good shape, and he had the perfect mustache, and just everything about him just exuded knowledge. It exuded professionalism. I mean, it was just, and I was like, good Lord. But one thing that he was good about was he was very confident in himself, but he was able to walk up to a young buck like me at 2 years, and he would say things to me. He'd be like, man, how many years have you been in the police department now? I'd be like, oh, Corporal, I've only 2 years. And he goes, man, you act like a 10-year officer. I'm shocked that you're telling me. Now, just those words alone
built you up.
Right.
I was like, whoa, and he had a way of doing things, and if you messed up, he would come up to you and he'd be like, hey, you messed up. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, I know. He goes, let's go get coffee. We're going to talk about it. Yep. And then you would sit down with him, and he would sit there and like work through it, have you explain why did you do what you did. Mm-hmm. And he would give you the opportunity to explain it. He wouldn't beat you over the head with it. He wouldn't tell you how jacked up you were. Right. He was like, well, let's look at it from this way. Now, if you had approached it like this or this, and he'd give you all these different scenarios or the right way to do it, and he'd look at you and he'd be like, all right. He goes, I expect you to mess up. Mm-hmm. One time.
Yeah.
He goes, so if this happens again and you make that same decision, we're not going to be having coffee.
Right.
And it's like, roger that.
Yes, sir. So is it correction or redirection? Right. And that's where we get to, like, he was prophesying over your career when he was giving you encouragement. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the space we want to operate in, is how do we encourage instead of course correct all the time? And we live in an environment where we're bent on course correction or fitting narratives, and social media drives a lot of that. It does. Yeah, but then we have cancel culture too, where we're calling it out here. We might get canceled tomorrow, you know?
Well, it's a hard lesson too. As a parent, it's a hard lesson because I struggle with it, you know, with sons. Yeah. Like, I feel like, and I have to catch myself sometimes because I'm constantly correcting. And it's like, man, like, it seems like all that comes out of my mouth is negative.
Well, he's a teenager now.
Yes, but 100%.
You reminded me of a conversation I had this last week. Keep going, though.
But it's that self-evaluation and sitting there and going, man, I need to start pointing out more positives. Like, I can't not correct. Like, I have to correct, but I have to be more intentional about pointing out the positives. Right. And doing that, building up and letting them know, hey, dude, like, you're killing it. Like, I am so proud of you. It's not even funny. But then whenever that correction comes, they're more likely to accept that correction because they know, well, he's been building me up and telling me that I'm doing this right and that I do this right. And now whenever he comes to me with correction, it's easier to sit back and not immediately throw up that wall because you know that the place that person's coming from is from their heart, right, as opposed to somebody that's constantly, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. And it eats me up sometimes because I feel like that's what I do. And I constantly have to check myself in how I'm talking to him because I don't want to discourage him. I want to build him up. I don't want him to think that he's constantly messing up, even if it feels like he's constantly messing up. Like you said, they're teenagers.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
they're learning.
Yeah. I mean, kids going to college, all the things happening with us, you know, going on in our lives right now. But that's where it's funny too, because taking that advice from you is always difficult for our kids to do. And my oldest, the 18-year-old going away, we were talking about it, and I'm like, look, you're gonna fail. And I fully expect that. But you can't get in a hole where you think your failure is your complete control and your life is over at that point. Because once you shell yourself into that, you're losing. But no, not only me, and not only your heavenly Father has your back, but your dad is always here for you regardless. And I might not have the perfect way out, but I'm always going to give you a way. And I'm always going to try and make sure that you're taken care of in the situation, because that's what being a good dad is. That's what I've envisioned being a good dad is to my son.
And
not enabling.
Right. Okay.
So there is a big difference between those two things. So I had to bring that up, but also being there. And it's funny because you were talking about the conversation, and we were talking this week, and my kids were coming to me and they're like, you just yell about everything. I'm like, I was talking completely normal in this situation. I was having a conversation like
Jeff
that.
Yells.
Yeah, I know, right?
Right.
Like, we've never seen it.
They say
cranking up his mic.
They say this is yelling though. Like if I have a
wow.
conversation with animation, they're like, "Why are you yelling, Dad?"
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "I'm not yelling." I'm like, "Are you kidding
But
me?"
I'm about to.
Well, I saw,
Yeah.
I saw
they've
one
heard
that
me yell.
said, you know, after all these years, I've realized that my dad was right. I just didn't like his tone.
Right. Right.
And it's like, yeah, you know, and we do as a parent. Sometimes we gotta check ourselves. There is a time and a place where you gotta yell. There's a time and a place where you've got to crack the whip and you've got to drop the hammer. But it doesn't have to be all the time. And like you said, and that was the point that I was making with the you're not enabling. Like there have been several times where I've seen he's about to mess up. Now, if I jump in and keep him from messing up, is he going to learn a lesson? No, you got to let him. You've got to let him fall, but you've got to be there to help him back up and to show him the right way. So, as a parent, it's sometimes hard knowing that they're about to stumble or fall and letting it happen.
Yeah.
But you have to.
Well, it's the whole fact to like knowing he's about to move away in a week and go to college, right?
Yep.
And it's like you're like, oh man, like all the questions come up in your mind. Is he prepared for this? Is he ready? Is your daughter too? No, but
She's
at
going
the end
far.
of the day, I told Brooke too. I'm like, look, we've done our part. We've prayed for him. We're raising him right. He's doing the right things. Is he gonna screw up? 100%. Is he gonna learn from those screw ups?
Hopefully.
I hope so. I hope so. But we gotta let him live too.
Yeah.
Because if we're always tracking them on Life 360, we're just like that black helicopter following the guys around to find out what our algorithms are, so we can throw them on social media and then know their whole back end story.
Right. Wherever they went.
You know, I went on a rant there, but
I'm with you.
that's where I'm like, man, I got like a week and a half left with them, and you know, Brooke's sitting there. She's like, you got to tell them more and talk about living life. I'm like, no, I got to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell them anymore. I've prepared them the best way I possibly could, and
it's like trying to cram for a test. Like
anything I
he's
throw
18,
at him right now.
so those 18 years were the studying. This last week and a half, I'm not going to be able to cram anything into his brain.
It was so funny, man. It was last night. They went out to go bowling with friends, and they dropped their car off at a friend's house who was on the other side of town, and they picked up another friend with the other friend they dropped their car off at to go pick them up to go bowling at West Chase Lanes. Westgate, yeah, in Austin. Get done, come back, and they're like, we're hungry. You know, they're 16 to 18-year-old boys, and they're like, let's go to Wingstop. So they're at Wingstop at 10 o'clock at night. It takes 45 minutes to get their food. Well, they decide to go from there to drop off the friend that's 25 minutes away before going to get their car that was 5 minutes away from them. And my wife's super fired up because they're going to get home after midnight, and they got a 16-year-old in the car. And I'm like, look, he didn't think about that. He's got to know to think. I'm like, he's 18 years old. They didn't think about that. They just thought they were taking their friend home, doing him a favor, and then getting their car and coming straight home after that. And that's all they did.
Yeah, it's also fear of missing out. That one that was going to get dropped off 5 minutes away didn't want to miss what was going to happen dropping the other one off.
Hey,
right.
So
Yeah, road trip, you know.
Yeah.
I'm like, so she's like, well, you're working tomorrow. We're up late. He shouldn't have his brother out that late. And I'm like, I agree with you there, and I'll talk to him about that. But I'm like, if that's the worst screw up I have with this kid,
Yeah, you probably won't do it again.
I'm fine.
Yeah. Like, oh, whoops.
I'm okay. And, you know, we don't need to focus on that. But it's like that. I'm like, that's so little compared to, like, you're about to go to a town where there's 75,000 kids within 5 years of your age. I'm like, they're like, Dad, how was college? I'm like, it was fun.
It was terrible. I hate it.
Yeah, a lot of friends, good
Boring.
times.
Really boring.
Yeah.
Nothing
Book
to do.
studies,
Nothing to do.
sat
Go
in
to
the
the
library the whole time.
A lot of Bible studies.
Yeah, yeah. There's a pool table
Find
in
every
the
church group you possibly can.
Commons. You can just go play pool.
So it's like, yeah, you just have those things going through you. I was
Chick-fil-A.
literally having those visions go through my mind of my college experience while she's telling me this stuff about he's home at 12:10, you know,
That's not bad.
with the 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, yeah, 16-year-old shouldn't be out with them that late. I get it. But at least the brothers are hanging out. So I'm happy about that. Like, I have other things that I'm happy about, so I'm looking at the flip side of that instead of getting annoyed by the fact that they went and dropped off the kid that was 30 minutes away to come back to their car that was 5 minutes away from them. And their excuse in it was, I had to wait 45 minutes for my wings, Dad.
It's Wingstop's fault.
It is.
It would have been 30 minutes early for the 45-minute order.
But that's our picture of life. We're so concentrated in our politics, and everything pushes us to see the mess instead of the positive things behind the mess. And then also course correct through that and use it as a lesson of positive instead of negative. Because back before, I'd probably be at 12:10 sitting at the door yelling like, tell me you're not taking the car tomorrow, blah blah blah, give me those keys. You don't get it, but now I'm like, all right, God made me different. Not better. So.
Are we team different or team better today?
I don't know.
Always team better.
But yeah,
better friend.
I can't be different than what God made.
We're better friend.
Better friend. Closed cover podcast. Better friend.
Better friend.
So
some words are best just
we have
standing
any
alone.
other questions?
No, we didn't cover question 2. I think he was going to wait.
Yeah, but
on that one.
No, we did question 2. It was question 3 that he was going to add.
Maybe that's what I did
next week.
Only thing we need to know is
but I think that this whole sermon that he's doing is like, it's solid.
It's good, yeah.
And
actually, this question ties into it.
The second one?
Mm-hmm. What candidate gives our children the best outcome for following Jesus?
Oh, that's loaded.
Since we ended up on children, from voting to kids, bringing them full circle here.
I mean, read the Bible, do what it says. Right?
Pastor Jody.
Read the Bible, do what it says.
Yeah. Basic instructions before leaving Earth.
That's right.
I love our acronyms. You got to say that again. Bible. Basic instructions before leaving Earth.
Yeah, I mean, I know my answer to that.
Yeah, me too.
And I have no qualm saying it, but I think Trump is probably the only one that has had, I think it was 30 plus pastors in the White House praying over him and the White House.
Worship bands performing in the White House.
Yeah. And I mean, the bottom line is, even if you don't think that Trump is true in the fact of whether that's something that he believes or if he's doing that as a political stunt, we've got people inside the White House praying over our president and praying over our country in the White House. Yeah. It's a win-win. Even if he's not completely honest in his belief or feeling, whether that was a political stunt or not, Christians were inside the White House praying over our country and the White House and our government and how they're going to lead this nation. That's a win-win to me.
It's a win.
And as far as our kids' well-being and our grandkids' well-being, he wants to put a stop to a lot of this woke nonsense that is destroying our kids, that's destroying our schools, and I'm
public education.
I'm 100% for that.
Public education enrollment is at an all-time low. People want to homeschool more than they ever have in their lives.
Yeah, there's a reason.
Right. And I mean, think about that. The funding of your schools is actually dictated by the amount of seats or butts that are in seats. And per policy, every student costs, $10,000 to $20,000 in given situations.
Which is why they don't care if your
salaries.
kid checks out after 10 a.m. as long as they're there for roll call.
Right. They want their money.
Think about that. Teacher retention is at an all-time low. They have a 30% attrition rate. I mean, think about that. 30% of our teachers quit on a yearly basis. Why?
I can't imagine trying to teach public school right now. Maybe elementary school, but
teachers don't want to go
really
back.
Bad in middle school
and the option to privatize education is becoming greater. They're looking at certified teachers and saying, well, how could I do this homeschool program and then pay you an hourly basis to come teach my kids?
Well, the government doesn't have control over what's being taught either when it's privatized.
And they could still walk through standardized testing, but it also encourages speak with like adult interaction and multi-generational interaction in the homeschool programs. And that's why a lot of people are chasing that. Like we think about, we're at the end of our kids' school careers, and they've been through the system a lot and in public education. And I'm in support of some of the things, the social interaction that comes with it, the athleticism that comes with it, especially with kids that are diagnosed ADHD. You need energy burning activities. You just do. And sometimes it's easier when somebody creates that for you than to create it for yourselves. But it's just gotten to the point of, are we teaching or are we trying to manipulate?
Indoctrinating.
Marketing. Agenda. But it also comes back down to like even DEI is getting pulled out of major universities because major universities enrollments are dropping at a staggering rate.
I think UT dropped their DEI program this year.
They did. The state of Florida.
Right.
They tried to ban it all.
Well, because they noticed that their overall enrollment has decreased significantly, and it was based on just agendas that were being rolled out. But I mean, if a state school or public education depends on our taxpayer dollars, education above that's privatized. The cost of educating has become significantly greater based on how we manipulated the market and increased manufacturing by 300% and other things. I mean, we call inflation at 10% right now over the last 4 years. When you look internally at the cost of goods sold, I mean, you're looking at an inflation rate to the end consumer of 10%, but a 200% increase in costs in a lot of situations. I mean, I work in manufacturing at certain points, and there's limits to what we could do based on the things that have been imposed on us and where we could get things from and time frames. I mean, we used to be able to serve people well, and we've put limitations on that based on the fact that we don't even self-produce most things anymore, right? So that's all those education fronts, and how are we making our next generation better at that? Is it by indoctrinating different ideals of politicizing them? No. It's like, teach them the Bible, teach them the world. Go own a business, kid. You want to go design a t-shirt brand? Go design a t-shirt brand.
Well, a lot of the system was created the way it is to put people in offices or plants.
Control.
To manufacture goods and sell them.
Right.
They're filling up, especially now with computers. They're just filling up cubicles with people. And they call them bullpens for a reason.
Yeah.
You're literally just corralling them in there to work for 8 hours, and you fatten them up with, birthday of the month cake, and
couldn't do it.
I did it for a while. That office culture, man.
Happy people create happy products.
You're on the road a lot, so you're not stuck in an office. But
I've worked from home for
that drove
20
me
years,
crazy, man.
So I couldn't imagine being in an office anymore. I'd be insane. But
some of us are just not meant to be in a cubicle or an office.
No, it's like Cajun. It's like Cajun.
Most of us probably are not.
Cajun a dog. I mean, what breaks their spirits more than anything? I mean, my I crate train my dogs, so every night I'm like, I snap my fingers and they walk into their cage. But what's the first thing they do? Like, oh man, you make me go sleep in there. Come on.
It's funny you bring that up because I was just making a comment today. So one of the guys that works with us is a canine handler. And I walk by, and the dog's name is Bach, but he's sitting in the cage in our office, and he's just like laying up against the cage and like watches me with his eyes as I walk by, and I'm like, what a miserable life. Yeah. Because if you think about those working dogs, like they literally have their really only social contact is with that handler,
right?
And it's for a reason, and it keeps their work drive, high. So if they're in that cage constantly or in the back of a car and there's no social interaction, then every time that they come out of that cage, they know it's time to work. And that's what their drive is for, and it's for that reward at the end of completing their job.
Be careful what you say. Somebody's going to protest that in a minute.
Well, they can protest it all they want.
It's not going to stop canines.
Yeah, it's when you look at the.
It is kind of sad though.
Well, I mean, it is. Yeah,
but,
I look at it, but
they still get a lot of attention from their handler.
No, they do. And I mean, they do a lot of work with them, but I mean, it's to keep them focused on the job at hand and the job at hand only, so they're not sidetracked. Or because if they're living a cush life and they're able to go and walk around the office whenever they want, and go hang out and lay on that bed in the AC,
those dogs downstairs,
like the ones that
they get
any
lazy.
dog owner has,
right?
Then whenever it's 110 degrees outside and I expect them to hop out of the back of that truck and go do their job and look for narcotics, they're going to be like, I ain't stepping on that hot concrete.
It's air conditioned in here.
But if you keep that structure in there and you keep them away from the ability to socialize and you keep them away from that ability to know anything other than their job, and that's kind of what we're talking about. It's
right.
Because who spends more time with your kids while they're in school? You or the people at the school?
Right.
It's the teachers, it's the administration, and that's what they are focused on primarily while they're at school. So you have to be concerned about what the content is that they're being taught, because we only get them for a couple of hours, maybe even less than that a day if they have other activities that they're doing. Yeah. So as an influence as a parent, you really only get weekends and maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at night. And then as they become teenagers, then it's straight up to their room.
Once they get a driver's license, you never see them again.
Yep. Or a girlfriend.
Gone.
Yeah. So I focusing on what is being taught at school, or having I will call it a luxury, because it is a luxury to be able to homeschool your kids. Because I have a job and Casey has a job, so we've got 2 full-time jobs. Like, we can't homeschool our kids.
Right.
I would love to be able to, but you were just bringing up inflation and the cost of things.
Yeah.
One of us would have no income coming in, and we can't do that right now.
Yeah.
So we're occupied by having to have 2 incomes because of the price of everything going up. So now I have to have my kids in a public school being taught, or I could put them into a private school, but then I'm going to be paying my taxes for them to go to public school and paying for them to go to a private school, which brings up
the school voucher program.
Which is elected officials that can decide that. So it may not be the president that decides that, but your governor, over the state can determine whether or not we're going to open that up or not. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to pay attention to when it comes to voting. You have to be educated in what's going on with your children, and specific to that question, who's going to be the right one for your kids, because it's just becoming harder and harder and harder to have complete control over what your kids are being taught. Yeah. Because you look 30, 40, 50 years back, whenever you had the man that worked, and the wife that also worked and had a full-time job, it was just at home, and they were taking care of the kids. They were taking care of the house. They were taking care of those things that now we pay people to do, So we've definitely gone in a bad direction whenever it comes to that. And have been,
I think, chasing materialism, really,
100%.
to get the newest car or the nicer house, keep up with the Joneses type thing. If you 2 people were able to work, and of course women's liberation and all that feminism stuff.
Well, and conceptually,
which, some women should not be at home raising the kids.
Right.
I've known women who hated it.
Yeah.
And went to work and would rather drop them off and pick them up later.
But even thinking through,
well, it shouldn't be demonized.
Right.
And it's getting to a point to where it's demonized.
The luxuries of even the poorest people in our society are still 90% richer than the rest of the world. And that's the crazy thing to think of. We don't know the problems that people have, and we fully engage and think those luxuries are a necessity in our lives. And that's where you break it down and you're like, okay, what really makes sense?
Go on a mission trip. If you have the opportunity to go on a missions trip, go on a missions trip, and it will open up your eyes when you go to a third world country and you actually interact with the people of that country and see. Number one, what blew me away when we went and did that was the happiness and joy that these people had. But then you look at what they have access to, and we would be miserable.
We talked about two things last week. What was that island where the people are like, don't you come to our island?
Sentinel. Yeah.
The Sentinel Islands, where they're like, if somebody even comes close, they're throwing
spears at you.
Like, get out of here.
They'll eat you when they're done killing you.
You're corrupting us. And then about that other tribe, I think you were talking about, where they got introduced to.
That was James. James sent that article out right after.
Yeah, the Amazon tribe, and they had a problem after that. And we'll just leave it there. But
yeah, well, I mean, we at least got eased into it.
Yeah,
with the whole internet, but you can't. You get people who've never seen an iPad or a phone before, and you give them access to the internet and social media and everything else, and it's like, to them, it's probably like a religious experience, getting to learn and see all these things, all the technology that they never knew existed. Like, is this from God or is this from the devil? A lot of people would think it's witchcraft.
When we were in Guatemala, we went to, I can't remember, I think it was called Lake Isabel was the lake that we were on, but it's got a tributary that's ridiculously long that goes through the jungle and then it dumps out into the Caribbean. And we had the privilege of going to a tribe that was right off of that tributary that goes to the Caribbean that had never been face to face with white people, basically. Now, they had seen them go by down the tributary in boats, but they had never had full, true interaction with them, and we were going to be the first ones to go and actually sit down with them. And we went there, and it was culture shock, but it was amazing once we started interacting with them, and they had all the kids were running around, and we had gone through and done the majority of what we were going to do. I think we had just finished eating, and we're just kind of hanging out, and there's a language barrier. Like, I can't communicate with them, but me and one of the other guys, there was like a older hollowed out coconut, and we're bored, right? So we sit there and we start throwing it back and forth to each other like a football, and these kids, like, their eyes just went like, what? We never thought to do that. So we're sitting there kind of just throwing it back and forth, and then we get the kids involved, and then we kind of get them in a line, and we start running routes with them and throwing them, the coconut and everything. And then comes time to leave, and they would not let us. They were like literally trying to pull us out of the boat, to have us stay and hang out with them, just because they had never experienced anything like that before. And it was, that whole trip to Guatemala was life-changing for me.
We need to send them some footballs.
Right?
It'd be fun.
Yeah, coconut's not too fun if you don't catch it. Luckily, it was an old hollowed out one. If you've ever picked up
jam fingers.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But,
all good. But I think it just boils down to it's our prayer to God and what His will is and what His kingdom looks like, and how we lead our family, how we lead our lives, how we interact with people, how we look at the things that are positioned around us, and we're just like biblically grounded in that. Like, we need to know the word and what it's speaking and look beyond the surface.
Right.
And I think that's all we're getting to today.
Well, and I think if you know the Bible too, and you have seen the imperfect people that God has used to do great things.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying Trump is perfect. Nobody's saying that Biden's perfect, but God has a way of using imperfect people to change the world.
Yeah, and I think He's been using the imperfect people of this party for too long. I think it's time for a change.
No, I'm not going to argue with you. But
let's try a different set of imperfect people for a while and see how that works out. Because right now we're on a fast-moving train to destruction.
Well, maybe to Jesus coming.
Yeah, could be.
So
that would be nice.
Yeah,
let's get it all over with.
Right. Which
see y'all on the flip side.
Go back to the whole theory in that one flip of a button, it could all be over anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
you never know. But all those links you said are on the
they're all in the description.
What's the tree called?
Link tree.
The link tree at the bottom of the description.
Link tree. Find a link tree everywhere. If you're already watching this, just scroll down a little bit.
And if you got to this point, you've stayed longer than most.
Welcome.
We love you.
Peace out.